that the rough and tumble cowboy image. What other perceptions do people around the country hold of Texans that you just don't think have any credence?
Well, most people assume that we are very proud people, braggadocious, loud. We probably are from time to time. Most people think that we have a very rich heritage that may not be that rightly deserved. We think that it is. Most people consider Texas to be a very conservative state, a state that is not willing to open up to other people. That has changed in many ways. The perception may have been reality many years ago, but I think if you look at the political structure of Texas, the emergence of very young people in the public sector and the private sector, women and minorities who hold key positions in government and in the private sector. Our universities, our institutions have grown in national stature over a period of time, and I think that that will probably continue.
Where are the power centers in Texas?
In a lot of ways in government, obviously, that has served as a catalyst for having power in other areas. We will still continue to dominate the oil and gas industry. Energy will remain a big part of the clout that Texas has around the country. The space industry and the offshoots of that. We've developed an ability to diversify around NASA in Texas. A growing corridor of technology. Silicon Valley at one point in California was considered the only high-tech center of activity in this country. And Texas is beginning to be competitive in that area, even in the film industry. Dallas, to a great extent, is becoming a mecca for the filming industry in this country. And I think that it shows that Texas has an ability to adapt.
We are recording this interview in Houston. Houston is your home?
Yeah, it is. I'm a native Houstonian.
Are there many of them?
A good number. In a city that is now about 1.7 million people, there are a good number of people who have come in from other parts of the country and other parts of the state. But there are a lot of people who are native Houstonians, born and reared right here in Houston, Texas.
What part of the city did you grow up in?
I grew up in a southeast neighborhood known as Sunnyside, low income, a working class minority neighborhood.
And where do you live now?
I live in 3rd Ward, the McGregor area, not very far from the University of Houston and Texas Southern University, and probably about 15, 20 minutes from the neighborhood I grew up in.
Would you tell me about your childhood?
Well, I'm the son of 2 working class parents. Growing up, my father was a yard man, and my mother did day work as a maid. My father also worked a graveyard shift at the Veterans Administration Hospital as a nurse's assistant. My mother went to school at night in order to be a nurse's assistant and still does private duty work as a nursing assistant. And my dad still does yard work. From time to time, he even does my yard. I think that he thinks about quitting on a regular basis because the pay is not too good when he works in his son's yard.
Brothers and sisters?
I have 1 brother and 1 sister. A sister who is very active in Texas politics as well. She was the president of the school board for the Houston Independent School District and still serves on that board. My brother lives in California, and we're a very close-knit family.
How did you and your sister both get interested in public policy and politics?
I suspect that it was something that was ingrained in us, being very close as a family and growing up in a community where church activity was very important. And my mother was, in many ways, one of the busybodies in the neighborhood. She always knew about everybody's problems, always wanted to be helpful, always organizing something in the neighborhood. And we both ran for political office early on in life as a brother and sister team in junior high school.
Did you win?
Yeah, well, my sister won, I lost. And I've done as much as I could to encourage her to give me an opportunity in politics since then. But Mickey Leland, who was clearly my mentor when he was alive, and in many ways is still a mentor for me, encouraged my sister to run for the school board about 4 years ago, when we single-handedly recruited her, went to her house on the day of the filing deadline, woke her up and said, "You've got to run for the school board. She's a PhD in business education. She ran and won, has done a good job. And I guess that I ended up holding public office on Leland's coattails in many ways. I went to Washington about 11 years ago as Mickey's administrative assistant at about 27 years old, and did it for 2 years, crisscrossed the country, and got hooked on politics, and ran for the city council with his blessings and won 2 years later.
But there's a bit of time in between that junior high school election and that job, and I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that. You decided you needed to go to college.
Did, and went to Xavier University in New Orleans for
a Catholic school?
a year and a half. Small Catholic school. In fact, I think it is the only black Catholic university in the country. And I'm Baptist, by the way.
Why did you choose that school?
My principal in high school thought that I was fortunate in that I did have an ability to express myself, but he thought that I spent a bit too much time figuring out how to take shortcuts to get things done, and he thought that a good structured Catholic environment was exactly the thing that I needed. So he encouraged me to go to Xavier, despite the fact that many other schools gave better financial aid packages in terms of scholarships.
Was he right?
I think so. In terms of my, from time to time, not applying myself as much as I probably could have, and being away from home was good for me at about 18 years old. So to go to Xavier, to go to New Orleans for about a year and a half was a good experience, although I think that by the second semester, I knew about as much about the French Quarters as I knew about political science in the city of New Orleans.
What happened next?
I transferred to Texas Southern, came back and worked in the athletic department and graduated about a year early. And I hadn't taken the LSAT, so I couldn't apply to law school. And I ran into a professor from the OBJ School of Public Affairs who wanted to bring more minority students into the OBJ school. And I was working in the athletic department, and he had this notion that a lot of people who were jocks could be pretty good students. And he was under the mistaken impression that I was a jock because I worked in the athletic department. So they offered me a scholarship. I went to the OBJ school, and it was a great experience. While I was there, I ended up working part-time for Bill Hobby, who at that time was a lieutenant governor of Texas. And I knew him somewhat. I'd worked in his first campaign for lieutenant governor when I was a senior in high school and student body president in high school. So worked for Governor Hobby, studied at the OBJ school. They took me to Washington, D.C. on an internship at HUD back when Carla Hills was Secretary of HUD under the Ford administration, Nixon administration. And when I graduated from the OBJ school and got accepted to law school, I continued to work for Governor Hobby, and then for a short while went over and worked at the Texas Railroad Commission.
I read that at the time when you were considering going to the LBJ school that you actually had an opportunity at that same point to work for Barbara Jordan.
I did, and I'll never forget that interview. It was a job with Barbara Jordan essentially as a gopher, working in her district office. Go for this, go for that. It's a Texas term. And I had to make a decision in a relatively short time frame as to whether or not I'd go and get a master's degree in public administration or go and make some money and have a very exciting job working for the member of Congress from Houston. And Barbara Jordan made a comment to me that I would always have the option of working for a member of Congress, regardless of whether I realized it or not. She thought that option would still come my way, but she said you'll only have one opportunity to accept that scholarship and go to the OBJ school. So if I were you, I'd go to the OBJ school, then try and figure out how to work for a member of Congress down the road.
The advice was good?
Good advice. Excellent advice.
What influence has Bill Hobby been on your life?
What Bill Hobby gave me was a certain sense of patience. Bill Hobby is probably one of the most deliberative persons within the history of Texas politics. He does things in a very methodical fashion. He doesn't rush. He gives all parties an opportunity to say their piece and try and develop a consensus. Not that I follow that advice all the time, but when I think of Bill Hobby and the impact he's had on my life, it has been that sense of letting things work at their own course, a certain deliberacy.
When did you first meet Mickey Leland, ever?
I met Leland when I was a senior in high school and he was out campaigning, but he wouldn't have remembered me then. When I was on Bill Hobby's staff and working for a guy named Jim Nugent, who is now a member of the Texas Railroad Commission, and Mickey was on the other side campaigning for someone who's a good friend of mine, Jim Hightower, a populist, a very nationally known figure in national populist politics and Texas politics. Mickey was campaigning for Jim Hightower, and I was campaigning for Jim Nugent. I was campaigning for Jim Nugent because Governor Hobby, Bill Hobby, wanted me to campaign for him, and Leland gave me a hard time for doing that. But after doing it, I ended up working on the same team with him for a guy named Buddy Temple, who had won the Democratic nomination for another seat on the Texas Railroad Commission. And Mickey and I had visions that Buddy would end up being governor of Texas one day, and we were almost right. But Leland and I got to be very close through the Buddy Temple connection and during that campaign with Buddy Temple. And shortly after the election, he had this idea that he wanted to get someone black from Texas to go and work for the Democratic National Committee in Washington. So he had me go up and meet with a number of the members of Congressional Black Caucus about taking that job. And as it turned out, I ended up being offered a job to be his AA and taking it.
You've mentioned a couple times that he served as a mentor for you. What did you see in Mickey Leland?
Mickey was an idealist in the best of terms in Texas and then national politics. I mean, somebody who would simply not accept no for an answer. I remember when he wanted to create a select committee on world hunger at a time when people in Congress were beginning to downsize the notion of select committees. It was at a time when there was a battle as to whether or not the select committee on drugs would remain in effect or not. And I was one of the people on Leland's staff who said, look, it's a great idea, it ought to be done, the timing is right, but it'll be very difficult to get it approved in Congress. Mickey got on the phone himself and called a good 125 members of the House of Representatives, went and met with everyone in the leadership, insisting that something be done about world hunger, and was successful in getting that committee established. And then Mickey would come up with ideas that were so far out, so far-fetched, so ahead of their time, most people would laugh him out. The notion of getting the Russians to work with the United States to get food into Angola, using communist equipment and American know-how and American resources was an idea that was clearly ahead of his time. But clearly, when you think of Leland, you think of someone who's a visionary in politics in the very best of terms, and someone who enjoyed life to the fullest.
Why are you a Democrat?
I think that historically, at least since the era right after Reconstruction, the Democratic Party has been the party that has been willing to embrace the hard bread and butter issues that most middle-class Americans can relate to. We haven't always been as successful as we should have been in terms of articulating our message and the measures that we've advocated that have been helpful to middle-class Americans. But by and large, I think the Democratic Party has been the party for working women and working men in America, the party that has been most sensitive to issues of inclusion for minorities in all segments of American society, and that's why I'm a Democrat.
A couple of other things I'd like to get your perspective on. What does the Space Center and the space industry mean to this city?
NASA has been a pivotal part of Houston, Texas, and the state being able to diversify the economy away from the traditional base of oil and gas. Oil and gas will always be there. Energy will always be, in many ways, the bedrock of the economy of the state of Texas. But we're beginning to do a lot of the research so that we manufacture a lot of the technology that comes out of NASA, so that we benefit not only from being considered the capital for the space industry, but also being a capital for manufacturing many of the products that are used out at NASA. My company, my investment banking firm, by the way, recently helped finance the visitor center, which will be constructed out at NASA in Clear Lake City. But that has been in many ways the catalyst to catapult us to be major players in the economy of this country for more than simply oil and gas. In many ways, a medical center, the Houston Medical Center, is a phenomenon that will probably never exist anywhere else on the face of the earth. To have so many hospitals, so many office buildings related to the medical profession within a 5-minute drive of a downtown metropolitan area is something that has been a tremendous benefit for Houston, Texas, and for the state of Texas. At one point, we were simply considered a healthcare mecca for research, for cancer and other degenerative diseases. But we've also begun to develop the infrastructure to be able to manufacture many of the products that the technology creates a market for within the medical center. So in many ways, Houston, in terms of being the energy capital of the world, has become the space capital of the world, and we are rapidly becoming the medical technology capital of this country.